So we're gonna set the pad a couple inches below the hip crease at about the top of the quad, and then we're gonna slightly externally rotate the feet, tuck the chin, round the upper back, and start to hinge at the hip over the pad. We're gonna go as low as we can while maintaining a neutral spine. To initiate the way up, we're gonna think about pinching the glutes down into our hamstrings, pushing our hips against the pad, and we're going to squeeze our glutes at the top, but we're not going to exceed this neutral position into what we would call lumbar hyperextension. And we're gonna talk about all this and a lot more, so stick around for a more in-depth full breakdown if you wanna learn more about how to execute this movement and what some of the most common mistakes are. So when it comes to setting up the pad height, we want to set up the pad at the top of our quads, a couple of inches below your hip crease. And so if we look at my pants here, you could say the top of my pants here would be my hip crease. I want the pad to be a couple inches below that, more like at the top of my quad. And you'll see why that is. I'll be able to hinge at the hip and maintain a neutral spine. If the pad is too high, I'm gonna have to round my back, and I'll show you both of those. So this is it set up correctly for me, where the pad is a couple inches below my hip crease, more like at the top of my quad, a couple inches below kind of where the strap of my pants, where the elastic of the pants are. What that's gonna allow me to do is hinge over the pad and maintain a nice neutral spine. Now, if the pad is too high, what you'll see is even though this looks like it's right at my hip crease and that might look like it would be fine, what's gonna happen is the minute I start to hinge over this pad, I'm gonna have to round my back. And so more often than not, one of the big mistakes I see is the pad is set too high. You wanna set the pad at the top of your quads, a couple inches below the hip crease, so you can actually hinge over it and maintain a neutral spine. Now, what a lot of you guys will find out, especially people who are a little bit more vertically challenged, is that this machine isn't always made incredibly well for shorter people. You might find that even on the lowest setting, the pad is still set a little bit too high. What you can do is you can grab a couple of plates and you can put them on the foot plate, which will make you a little bit taller. It'll look something like this. Essentially, now what I've done is I've made myself taller, and so even if this was like the lowest setting that the machine went on, I could now be a little bit taller and it would actually fit me a little bit better. And so if you find that your machine, even on the lowest setting, is setting the pad too high up on your hip crease or too high up on your legs, grab a couple of plates, see if you can make yourself taller with this strategy. So I want to walk you guys through getting into the machine and executing a few good reps, and then I promise I will show you all the ways you can start to add load to this exercise. So once the pad is set to the correct height, you're going to get into the machine and you're going to make sure that the back of your legs or your calves are pressed up against whatever safety that the machine provides. From there, you're going to slightly externally rotate your feet, and all that means is having your feet, instead of them being straight forward, you're going to point them out just a little bit. That's going to help us shorten the glutes a little bit more. Now again, you don't need more than just a little bit. More is not better, so a slight external rotation of the feet, whatever feels natural, is going to work best. From there, you're going to get into position here, and I want you guys to tuck your chin and cross the arms across your body and round your upper back just a little bit. What that's going to do is going to help take your lower back, your erectors, out of the movement just a little bit. And I promise we will talk about that more in a bit. Now, from this position, I want you to hinge at the hip and descend as low as you can while maintaining a neutral spine. If I go much lower, I'm going to round my back. We don't want this. And so you're going to go as low as you can with a neutral spine, keeping that chin tucked, upper back slightly rounded, and then you're going to come up and squeeze the glutes. Now, when you are in that bottom position, you are thinking about the concentric phase or the way up. What I want you to actually be thinking about is taking the top of your glutes and tucking them down into your hamstrings. I know that that's a little bit of an abstract concept, but when you're in this position here, right, I want you to think about tucking your glutes down into your hamstrings, and actually that's how you're pulling your body up. And so I'm thinking about tucking my glutes down into my hamstrings and actually pressing my hips against the pad to pull myself up, almost like you're hip thrusting the pad. I'm thinking about tucking my glutes down into my hamstrings and pressing my hips against the pad. So a question I get a lot is, Jordan, when should I stop on the way up? How high should I go? And the best answer is to stop when your glutes are fully contracted, but that might be difficult for people to understand, especially if you're new to this movement. So what I'd like you to do is not come up beyond a neutral position. And so a neutral position would be when my body is in a full hip extension position here, and I'm in a nice straight line, all right? If I come up more than this, that movement there from here to here is all erectors, all lower back. And it's not the end of the world if we work your lower back a little bit, but it's not the main goal of this movement. And so I don't want to see you guys come up beyond this neutral straight body position into a hyper extended position here where the lower back is going to take over. So stop here in this neutral position when your glutes are fully squeezed. Don't surpass that position into more of like lumbar or lower back hyperextension, this arched back position. While I do think it's important to master this body weight first, I do think at some point you're gonna have to add some weight. And so let's talk about how we can do that. There are a lot of different ways you can load up this exercise, and before I show you any of them, I wanna tell you that none of them is inherently superior, none of them is the absolute best, but there are some general recommendations and I'll talk you through them. Now I'm gonna show you this in order of as you get stronger. And so after you've mastered body weight and you want to add a little bit of weight, I'm gonna show you that, and as you get stronger, kind of what makes the most sense in my opinion. And so when you just master body weight and you wanna add a little bit of load, I recommend doing that up near the forehead, and that would look something like this. And so you can take a small plate or a small dumbbell and you keep it up by your forehead here, tuck the chin, keep your technique nice and sound, back nice and neutral. Keeping the weight far away from your hips is gonna allow you to get more out of less weight because the weight is further from the pivot point. It's not something you need to understand, but when you first start to add a little bit of load, I recommend doing it at the forehead. Now, as you get stronger, it's gonna be tough to hold a 25, 30, 35, 40 pound dumbbell up by your forehead. You might wanna do something like holding that weight on your chest or under your chin, and that might look something like this. You can also hold that plate kind of across your chest, and that would look something like this, where your arms are a little bit more across the chest, tuck the chin. Now, if you are getting to a point where you're getting really freaking strong with this movement and holding a weight at your forehead is not practical anymore, and you need a heavy weight that you can't even hold on your chest, there is a way that you can load this up even heavier, and it's gonna require you using either a barbell or a pair of dumbbells where you can have straight arms, and I'm gonna show you some reps now with what that looks like, and then how to maybe modify your setup to make this work. Again, this is only if you've gone through the other ones and you've already gotten to a point where it's so freaking heavy that you can't hold it any other way than with straight arms like this. Now, what most of you will find is that your machine is not elevated up off the ground enough for you to achieve a nice full range of motion with straight arms. What you will find is that with straight arms, your arms are gonna touch the ground before you actually get into the amount of hip flexion that you want. And so that gives us a couple of problems, but one thing you can do to solve that is potentially elevate your machine by putting a bumper plate or two underneath the machine to elevate it a little bit so you can get that extra range. Now, as you can see, I can descend a little bit lower without my arms touching the floor, and if that helps you accomplish being able to load it like this, then that's really great, but it might not be practical for everybody with every machine. Sometimes they're bolted to the floor or something else. So the number one complaint that I hear with this movement is, Jordan, I'm feeling it all in my lower back. And if that's what you're experiencing, we're gonna go through a quick 3-point checklist and talk about it. Number one, that is okay. Your lower back is going to work on this movement. It is not a bad thing. People feel their lower back working and immediately think it's something negative. Having a really strong lower back is fucking awesome, and it's a good thing. And this exercise absolutely works the lower back to some degree. And so on some level, it's not the end of the world. Now we can do two things to try and make that less likely so that the glutes and the hams take the majority of the stimulus. Number one is gonna be making sure you're not going up too high. And so if you're feeling this all in your lower back, I'm going to ask you for a form video to make sure that you're not coming all the way up here, because if you are coming all the way up here, I'm not surprised you feel it in your lower back. Your lower back is working a ton right now. The second thing I will have you do is exaggerate the chin tuck and exaggerate the upper back rounding. So maybe you're performing the movement like this. I might have you exaggerate that chin tuck and that upper back rounding into something that looks more like this. That upper back rounding tends to help eliminate the lower back a little bit, but at the end of the day, the lower back is gonna work a little bit, and so I don't want it to be something that automatically is seen as something negative. And we'll close this down with just another couple good reps so you guys can see it all put together. Getting into the machine, slight external rotation of the feet, pads set at the top of the quads below the hip crease, chin tuck, upper back round, neutral spine, glutes down into hammies, don't come up too high. Pushing the hips into the pad,